Behind the scenes on a fantasy photo shoot is our topic today on Luminar Coffee Break, and it begins now. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to introduce our next guest. She's a Canadian born and raised former model turned photographer who's developed an ethereal style of photography. Please welcome the talented Renee Robyn. Hello, Renee. Glad to have you on our show.
Hi.
Yep. So, again, what do you have for us today?
So today I was, trying to figure out what maybe people would like. I didn't really know what your audience was, so I just made a slideshow of different fantasy composites that I did over the years and how the style has changed and like design choices and everything else. And then we had an ask here about a PSD walkthrough, so I have one of those queued up and ready to go. So
Great.
we'll see how fast we can get through this, and like if it's interesting, we'll see.
We'll be fine. Let's see this.
Alrighty, so yeah, so this one is like behind the scenes on fantasy shoots, and so it's definitely like an evolution of like, how I used to work behind the scenes and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is where kind of fantasy compositing started for me. You guys can't see the window of all the faces, can you?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. Right on. Then that doesn't matter. I can sit wherever I need it to. But yeah, so this is kind of where fantasy compositing started for me. For people who don't know, I got into digital art and compositing because I ride motorcycles and I got run over in a crash. And so I couldn't get into the world anymore. So I had to bring the world to me. And so this is the first studio I got on the right-hand side here. And it was this like little basement studio that like is a good thing I was a female photographer, because you walked in there and like thought you were going to get murdered because nobody could hear you scream. It definitely looked of like a place where like people went missing. But yeah, this is because I wasn't able to walk, like I would take like the crutches and like scoot my butt down the stairs to get into the studio. But it is where I discovered digital art and what that could do and what that could mean. In a world where I was always used to being able to use my legs and like get out into the world. And all of my career choices at the time all involved like my legs. I'd done, modeling, like runway modeling and everything. I worked in the trades. I did locksmithing and instrumentation. And everything always required my legs. I grew up on a farm. So I had no skills that involved, only my upper body. So photography and digital art was kind of the answer to that for me, because it took me about 6 months to learn how to sort of walk again.
And thank you for
And
joining
that just
us.
means walking
And I'll
without
see
assistance, and
you
another
at the
like
next
2
coffee
years to
break.
become like sort of functional. But anyways, this is kind of what started the whole thing. So this here, my friend was laying on a table and I didn't even edit out the part of the table that she's laying on here. So, we all start somewhere. I also learned that I love underwater photography. Underwater photography has been like this really, really big release for me. But at the time, all I had was a point and shoot, and I couldn't swim very well. So I would sit on the bottom of the shallow end of the pool and photograph my friends underneath like the local pool at 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings in Alberta. That water is absolutely freezing cold. So I do not recommend photographing underwater in Alberta because the pools are not heated.
I don't get cold.
Oh yeah, well, I'm from Canada. I don't have a choice. So and then from there, getting into more like spooky things, working with friends and being like, a friend of mine, she just made this mask and she was like, oh, do you want to photograph it? And I was like, yep, super do. And I had a friend of mine come over with an old coat and we kind of tried experimenting with stuff like this.
Great choice for the texture in the background.
Oh, that was actually that texture. That was the wall in the murder studio. I mean, you'd get caught for sure because there were cracks all over the place. You could never get it clean, but it was a pretty scary place for people who didn't know who I was. Sorry, you had a question?
Nope,
No?
you're
Okay,
doing
awesome.
great.
Yeah, so anyways, I also learned, so with digital art, that I could extend the life of costuming, because my previous brain would have been like, oh, we need to destroy this dress. But I was like, it's a really nice dress and I don't want to destroy it. So this is one of the most intense fake blood paintings I've ever done. And it took forever. Because of course, with lace and mesh, how, material soaks into certain types of fabrics versus others. It was just a lot of work.
That is
But
gorgeous.
I'm pretty happy with it to this day. I'm pretty stoked about it. I haven't been able
Photograph
to do it
too.
better since.
Now,
The
where
patience
did you get the
paid off.
bridge? Through stock art, or what did you do?
Oh no, I photograph all my own stock, so I was walking by
Nice.
this point. Um, so I photographed this in BC at the Capilano Suspension Bridge. So if you ever go to North Vancouver, you'll see it there. And it took a really long time to wait to get it without people on it. Even though I could have edited them out, but I didn't know what I was doing at the time. So everything was like really heavily, like, the early stage of my career, which I think everyone who's first getting into photography or digital art anyways, the experimentation phase is so important. It's part of the reason why I push not monetizing photography right away, for at least the first few years, because there's this beautiful, like, there's this really awesome, sense of finding yourself in a creative field that if you try to monetize right away, you kind of lose, which I think is kind of a shame. I think the purest form of chasing photography is doing it because you think it's interesting and it kind of like lights your heart on fire. Um, this is probably the most effective image I've ever made. I feel like I peaked way too young. um, this is an image. I had this image in my head for a really long time, and well, not necessarily this idea, but I was just trying to figure out how to create the sense of feeling like you're jumping out off of something into midair and like hoping that something is going to work. Photography kind of became this ahead of schedule, a full-time career, because I got run over. But then basically what happened, if like, several months after that, was my laptop died, my camera died, my car died, I had to move in something else. There were 5 things. And I was just like, oh God, like, what am I going to do? I'm basically like, I have to move and I have no car to move with. And I have no tools to, oh yeah, my lights died, my camera, my lights died. And I have no tools to do the job that I now have. So I was just like, okay, what am I going to do? So I wound up getting a job. I don't know if there's anybody here who works in, computers or IT or whatever, but I got a job as an SAP scheduler. And typically when I tell that to people who know the field, they're just like, oh God, because the job sucks, but they pay you really well for it. And I was like, perfect, right on, I can do this. And so for the first few months, I had this like, it was just like awesome, because I would just show up at work and money magically showed up in my bank account. I didn't have to negotiate. I didn't have to like worry about like taxes and everything else. Because it just automatically was all done for me. And I'd just spent like the last like 9 months or so, dipping my toes into self-employment unintentionally, because I didn't want to, but I just, I got run over and I had no skills. So that's kind of how it happened. So I have this job working in SAP, and all of a sudden I have like a pension and like a real wage, and like, I can do it while I'm sitting down. I'm not destroying my body like I was working in the trades. I had all these things. But I was so unhappy because I was still running a full-time photography business. So, the joy of, easy money lasted about, 3 months. And then I was just like, oh, this sucks really hard. What am I going to do? And I growing up in Alberta, I finally had like that job, quote unquote, that everyone is supposed to want, like the dream of that. And I just hated it. And so I was just like, what do I do? I don't understand. And so I called up a friend of mine a while later, and I said, like, this is the problem. Like, I have to quit one of these because I'm burning out. And he said, well, let me give you one piece of advice. And I said, what's that? And he said, if you quit art, it's going to be the worst 15 minutes of your life. And I was like, oh, damn, that's a good one, which was completely true. So I went into work the next day, and at that time already I'd started working with the global team and whatever. And, I advanced a lot faster than I'd planned on. And I wrote an email to not only the full, like my boss, but the whole company. And I was like, okay, guys, thanks so much. Like I'm done in a week or in 2 weeks. And he said, and my finger hovered over send. And I was just like, what do I do? What am I doing? And I finally hit send and I just cried for 2 weeks because I felt like I was just like, taking a leap of faith, right? Which is what this image is really about. And I thought about what that felt like for a really long time. And I was flying out to Halifax. I had a red eye flight and I was flying out to Halifax trying and just sleeping or trying to sleep anyways. And this image popped in my head of how to shoot it. And I was just like, oh my God, all I have to do is I could have somebody jump vertically in front of me. And then I can just like change the perspective in post-production. So a friend of mine, Ben Von Wong, he's a rooftopper, or at least he was at the time. And so he was in Hong Kong and I said, hey buddy, do you mind taking a photo hanging off one of those rooftops for me? And so he sent this over because there's no way I like to take all my own stock images. There's no freaking way I'm climbing on top of a building and just like dangling my ass out, holding on to something and just be like, click. It's not gonna happen. I will fall for real. So anyways, yeah, that was how this image came together. And, I really felt like, people who were afraid of heights when they looked at this image, they had like a gut visceral reaction. And that hasn't really happened since in my work. And so I really feel like this one it holds a very like special place in my heart, in my creative process. And it did happen early in my career. And this is what I was saying, why the experimentation process is so pure, because you don't have the rules in the box built up in your brain yet of what you're supposed to do with it. So then dipping more into fantasy, I started getting in with different LARPers and cosplayers, and LARPing and cosplay wasn't quite as big as it is now, so it was a little bit harder to find people, but I found this group in Montreal that I started working with, and I made some of my favorite images out of these guys. They were all really, really cool.
I'm sorry, did you change the image?
Yeah, did it not change?
No.
Damn it. Stop sharing.
It's okay. Yeah, try it again.
Yeah. LARPers, live action role playing games. So
Gotcha.
basically it's like video games, but in real life. So you're like, I am a knight, and you run up to somebody and you beat the crap out of them with a foam sword. It's super nerdy, but it's also really fun.
Do you want to reshare your screen again and see if it comes up?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I'm gonna pull that into the corner there so I can see. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Damn it.
I can see it, yeah.
Are you
We can see it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
We see
great.
just fine.
Perfect. All right, so keep going.
You can't see it, Vanelli?
No, but that's okay. I'll figure this out.
Alrighty, so these are the live action role playing guys. So basically what these guys do is they run out into the forest and they play fantasy games but in real life.
Oh,
So yeah, I was really, really, really stoked about these ones and what I could do with them and like what the potential could be. So it was the first time where fantasy started to become more of like a tangible experience for me. So this is the piece here. Again, I photograph all my own stock. So I was traveling through Europe and I started photographing different ruin sites and everything. And this is actually another point that I was going to get to, which is going back and photograph or re-editing your old work. So this was an image that I thought was cool, but I never really felt like I nailed it. Like I never really quite got what was there. I don't know how it is for you guys when you're working on your images, but for me, when I am working on this kind of stuff, it feels like I get this weird feeling. Yeah, live action role playing. That's exactly what it is. Anyways, sorry, I just saw the comment in the chat pop up. But so basically what it is like, when I'm working on something, I can feel like, when you rub the fur on a cat the wrong way and they kind of go, that's kind of what it feels like when I'm working on an image that doesn't quite sit right, where like, I know I'm on the right path, somebody's petting me, but they're rubbing the fur the wrong way. So it's like, yeah, I'm getting petted, but it's the wrong direction. And I kind of work on images until like, it feels like somebody's like petting the fur on the cat the right way. And so it took me a few years, but I came back to this image and I finally came together with this one.
Nice.
Which I'm much more happy with. I actually had to learn a lot about composition and color theory and everything. And even this was pretty ham-fisted on the color theory, but don't read the chat, we were crazy. No, I need to keep an eye on it just in case the question pops up. Yeah, so basically just like, you know, I had to learn more stuff to come back to execute the concept properly. So definitely if you're looking at getting into fantasy and everything, you know, even if you're not, you know, if you have a concept that you tried a few years ago and you don't feel like you did it, go back and tackle it again. That didn't show properly, weird. I'm just gonna roll with that. This image here, this actually saves me because I'm actually terrified of spiders. So another thing that I like to do is I like to tackle the things that I'm afraid of when I'm doing fantasy photography. One of them is spiders, particularly big ones. So for a morning, it's nice to not have to stare at the whole spider, but there is a whole spider in there. I was afraid of spiders, so I was just like, well, we have to tackle this. We need to not be as afraid of spiders. This is one of the few stock images that I did not photograph my own because I would have turned inside out. So I went into a stock site and picked up a spider image and composited it in, but I zoomed in super, super close and I put Super Troopers on the TV. And I just sat on my couch editing this and just like really close. And I was like, it's just that dude's mustache, like the big hairy leg. And I was like, no. It was just cold sweats the whole time. You know, and then obviously the next one, I have a, you know, growing up in the prairies of the Canadian North, I have a very inexperienced and unsettling trust of the ocean. So, you know, at the time there were, you know, earthquake and tsunami warnings coming off of the West Coast. And I was just like, you know, trying to visualize what would it be like if, you know, a large mass of water just came over the mountains. Obviously it wouldn't be built in this shape, I know that, but I decided to combine two more things that made me uneasy. I don't have any ghost shots actually. I, for some reason, have never really experimented with that concept. I don't really know why.
Good. I'll watch the chat for you, and then if there's a question, I'll throw it out to you.
Yeah, sounds good. So this is an image here. This is kind of I tried looking really hard for behind the scenes images that I had that would show, you know, some of what I had built over the years. So this is an image I did for Intel, actually. Intel had hired me to do a campaign for them. And so we went out and we photographed all the back plates, and then we went into the studio and photographed the model. And one of the mistakes I made was I forgot to check. I got the measurements of the model, but I didn't get the height of the model. So the dress was way too short for her. And she was really tall. So yeah, but you know, it was an interesting experiment because like what I had to do was I had to, you know, on the spot, you know, video cameras rolling, go out and photograph all the pieces, like straight from concept to execution to finish, and do it all in one single day. That was a huge challenge, especially for me at the time, but I'm kind of happy with this.
Oh, it came out beautiful.
Thanks. I wish the dress had been longer. Part of me, so this is the thing where I almost stopped using patterned fabrics, was to extend it. And at the time, the techniques and tools to do that would have just, I didn't have time in the day because we had to do it concept to execution in a single go. I didn't have time to actually fix the length of the dress, which was a huge bummer. So how do I blend subject to background? Tediously. Very detailed masking. Basically, I zoom in really, really close and do all hand masking, although the select subject tools in Photoshop are finally actually getting a lot better. And then a lot of color and shadows, lots of hand painting. So.
Soon you're going to love Luminar Neo. Is going to have portrait background removal.
Sweet.
To make this, oh, it's going to be incredible, especially for a shot like this.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue I always have with this stuff is how well it handles hair and like beady stuff like this here. I'll take any, I always think it's funny, people are just like, oh, automation, boo. And I'm like, oh my God, no. If I don't have to spend like 4 hours doing a mask and I can just click a button, 100%. Lighting the models, so she first get a background in mind, then light the models to match. That's the easiest way to do it, is if you have the background first and then you match the lighting. It's a lot harder if it's the other way around. If you photographed your subject ahead of time and then you got to find a background plate to match it, which typically is how I operate, is I'll photograph someone in the studio and then I'll go looking for backplates. It's the wrong way to do it. but it is the only way that I do it typically, like 9 out of 10 times. Then I started working more with VFX artists. The picture changed that time, did it, Vanilla? So this was shot actually in LA with a model and a makeup artist whose work I just absolutely love. And I didn't even know what was showing up at the studio when we shot this. And all of a sudden this guy shows up and he's being led because the contacts he can't see and he can't speak. And the makeup artist is like, yeah, we're getting really funny looks outside. And I was like, no freaking kidding. I can't imagine why. But then this is where I started to really understand the power of, using actual practical effects as opposed to just doing everything in everything in post-production, is like the beautiful blend of what happens when you use great physical VFX and digital art together.
Nice.
These guys here, this big ogre guy, he's, just an extension of working with that group in Montreal. And then I started working more in Europe. So this is the designer and model Feritas on the right-hand side here with the owl headdress. She's fantastic. And I really learned a lot about, so she taught me this very simple thing, which is we were on a podcast together and the host said, what is it that you think about when you're designing your clothes? And she said something very profound. She said, I think about how I want people to feel when they wear my clothes. Do I want them to feel powerful? Do I want them to feel sexy? Do I want them to feel whatever? And I had never thought about that before when I was styling my subjects of how do I want them to feel in the clothing? How do I want them to feel in these images? I just kind of ran intuitively into it head first. And that was a huge learning moment for me in changing about how I work with subjects and how, all the pieces kind of come together in the prep work and everything. So that's definitely a part of the process that I can really, really thank her for that I had never considered before that. I started working more underwater again. This is shot in Los Angeles. And, I love, love, love working underwater. There should be 2 here. Yeah. And I just think it's so interesting and it's so hard. I mean, anybody who's ever photographed underwater, that it's like the hardest thing I've ever shot. There's nothing even comes close to how challenging it is because you might think you have a great shot, but it's out of focus because it photographed, even if your water's super clear, the focus because we're shooting at low aperture. In this case here, I was photographing just with sunlight. You can just blow focus, completely because something else will be in focus, the air bubble or something like that. So you'd be looking at the back of the camera in this housing, this big, massive housing, and you're going like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then you get onto the computer, you're just like, no. So underwater photography has always been like this big passion of mine, but it is definitely like one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. So,
I love how you have her tail kissing the top of the water.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, well, with these ones here, I just told her, I was like, can you just swim just under the surface, just back and forth across the pool, like for 20 minutes. One of them will probably turn out.
Now, what did you do for lighting? What did you do for lighting on this?
Sunlight, just sunlight.
Wow.
I wasn't photographing with strobes underwater at the time yet. I actually didn't include any of the strobe photography work underwater in this presentation, but I do have a little bit. I'm very, very new with working with strobes underwater. Mostly I work, so a friend of mine has an underwater studio in Los Angeles, which is way warmer than doing it at 9 a.m. in Alberta in unheated pools. Long Beach is way better. So he has an underwater studio in LA, and prior to lockdowns and everything else, I would go down to LA and, we'd spend the day working together in the pool. So if you guys are ever interested, or if any of you live in LA and you want to shoot underwater or take underwater workshops, I can definitely post a link to his classes in the chat. He's awesome. Really nice guy. Actually, Vanilla, he might be a nice guy to have on your show. He's very cool and super creative. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about this after. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful shot.
Thank you. And then I started experimenting in the ways of making myself uncomfortable. I hate photographing on location. This is my least favorite way to shoot fantasy photography, is going out where people can see me, And which is funny because I'm extremely extroverted, but when it comes to a creative process, it's very much so about what's going on between like, you know, my skull and my eyeballs. And I don't like thinking about bugs or people taking my equipment or whatever. I would much rather composite all these pieces going in front of her than go on location and actually shoot it 9 out of 10 times. It just makes me really uncomfortable. And I don't really know why. But this was photographed in Denmark with a friend of mine, Maria. And, you know, I love the images and I love what we shot, but at the same time, I wish I had spent more time in the studio with her. So this is another experiment, another learning piece for me. This is a model and designer, Linda Friesen. She's from the Netherlands. And I spent a lot of time there. And, you know, she designed this whole dress. So the whole thing, it's a work of art. And when she showed up, she said, "Oh, I just made this, you know, it'd be really fun if we turned me into like some kind of moon creature." And I was like, "Yep, I got you." But I didn't know exactly where I was going to put the moon or anything. So I had to basically paint in a bunch of light in post-production because I lit it completely wrong. So on the topic of having your backgrounds first and then, you know, adding the light, it's so much easier if I had just built this background ahead of time, and then I would have known exactly how I wanted to put her into this image. I could have lit it properly, but I didn't. So
Yeah, you just spent extra time relighting, but still, it came out beautiful the way you did this.
Thank you. I super appreciate it. She loved it, which was the most important part. That's the only thing that matters in these kinds of scenarios, you know, when you're collaborating with people whose work you really admire, because she's just like a stunning designer. She's so good. And I was just thrilled that she was willing to work with me. And so, you know, that is kind of like the wish list, is getting to work with people who inspire the crap out of you, right? And so you want to be able to deliver something they also really enjoy and really appreciate. So I was just like, well, hope she likes it, send. And she did. So this was another one here. Strangely enough, on this presentation, it looks like my horizon isn't straight, which is going to bother me forever now. I've never noticed that before. I think that is going to make me absolutely nuts. I'm going to have to fix that. Maybe it's an optical illusion. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, this is another image. If I had more time, but maybe not today because I get pretty foul-mouthed with it. This is an image that just fought me all the way through to make. So I photographed this with my sister. We photographed her in Europe. And then, you know, I photographed a bunch of pieces to build the skyline between Germany and Belgium, and just kind of like smashed it all together. And color grading this was an absolute nightmare. It was so hard. Nothing worked out. Basically, it became this, you know, anybody who works in Photoshop, we all know, or digital art or whatever, we all know how like our relationship between ourselves and the software and the computer is kind of like a codependent but slightly abusive relationship where like stuff crashes and like you just can't really get it working the way that you want it to. This was like the blowout between me and my software, trying to figure out how to make this work, and it just didn't. I have this color palette whenever I'm color grading that it's like lots of crappy, horrible, muddy blues and magentas. And whenever I get to that stage, I know I have to walk away. And this image landed there several times. And the next piece of advice that I can give when we're working on digital art stuff is the importance of having a nap and the importance of walking away. So I basically just like doubled down on this thing, trying to get it to work, forcing it. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And so finally I just like closed it all down, walked away, had a nap, left it for a little while, came back, and then like, bam, this came out in about 20 minutes. So sleep and naps, especially if you're working on stuff that is really frustrating you and really challenging you, I cannot stress that enough of how helpful that is in the process. This is another one here. So this is an example of photographing it correctly. I knew that I wanted to, so there's two ways you can photograph stuff. You can photograph stuff for your environment luminance, or you can photograph stuff for easy masking, and rarely are they the same thing. So in this case here, I knew I was going to I photographed her in Amsterdam. Her name's Tino, and she's wearing a dress by that fairy test girl, the owl headdress designer. So she made this incredible dress, and I was just like, oh my God, like where I live, we have these ice castles. I could totally photograph some ice castles and just go and put you in. So, but the problem is that either I photograph her against a black backdrop and all the environment bounce light is going to get sucked away because of course black is going to absorb all the light. Or I photograph her on a white backdrop where she's wearing a white dress where the masking is going to be horrible. And I've tried this since with like the automated masking stuff and it just vomits. It has no idea what to do because how can it? Like some of these feathers are almost the exact same color as the backdrop. But I would rather do a difficult mask than try to color correct for environment luminance. So I photographed her wearing white in a white background, and it just meant that all of this color correction work down here, especially the contact points, was so much simpler because what she was standing on, if I was putting her into snow, was exactly the environment luminance that she was going to be in. But damn, that mask took forever. So yeah, so this is a larger shot of it here. So
Sweet.
yeah, I love that outfit. It's so fun. I also do some work with veterans and Canadian military, so on and so forth. So this is just another image of like a different lighting setup. So this is where I was like looking through behind the scenes. I was like, do I have a bunch of like setup shots of like lighting and stuff? So I thought that this might be helpful here. So this is just a large overhead light over top. And then I had a second handheld light just to give a little bit of catch light here in the eye and fill in some of the shadows a little bit. So for any of the lighting geeks in here, which I'm sure there's one or two. This one here, okay, so this was a project that I was like trying to stretch my wings on. And so I was like, well, what we'll try to do is I'm going to do a bunch of artwork out on location and all the shots are going to be in camera. So we're going to bring in, and it took me forever. I mean, I'm still working on this project, but this was like 4.5 years of prep work for one shoot. I have tried Topaz Mask AI and it does work for some things, and like all automated stuff completely blows up on other things. Yeah, so anyways, so this one here, we were shooting it on location, and the whole shoot, basically it was supposed to be like a nice spring day, and nature was like, haha, 90% of your images are going to look like this, because it was it was perfectly clear, well, not clear, but it was like perfectly overcast. It was like perfect light and everything. And then the snow started and I just blew focus constantly. I shoot with a Canon 5D Mark III, and this was before any of that fancy like AI focus stuff. None of that existed yet. But anyways, this shoot wound up being like some of the biggest composites I've ever made in my life. Like this one took me about 3.5 months to go through all of the images to figure out how to start piecing them together, to start telling the stories, because nature just didn't want to play along. This is a shoot where I learned that if you're working with horses, you need stunting insurance. I had no freaking clue. I thought that my insurance would cover everything, and I had a bunch of equipment. I rented a bunch of Broncolor for this shoot, and nope. There is no such thing as regular insurance that will cover working with animals, even if they're just standing there. So tip for those of you who like working with big horses, you gotta pay the day of your shoot to fill up your account for stunting insurance. But this was like, it was supposed to be nice and dry and everything, and it was so slippery. This is all mud. We had to slow everything down. Basically 100% of the concepts that I had that I wanted to shoot, that we've been working towards and training together for about 4 years, we couldn't do. And these guys are all stunt performers. They're all stunt actors. They do jousting. They do like all the things. They do like all the medieval times games and stuff like that. And this was like one of the biggest learning experiences, because just nothing went right, other than the fact that all the horses, all the riders, all the everything were completely safe. Like nobody was injured. Nobody got hurt, nothing, everything was okay. But beyond that, artistically, everything just went for crap. And it was a huge learning experience of like changing everything that you have planned on the fly. So one day I will do the original concept. Yeah, definitely. The cool part about this shot though, is that the one thing that isn't composited in this image is him shooting, and the arrow direction. That's actually like all in camera. That's the original plate is the horse rider here in the middle on that arrow, and then everything else was added on around it and built in around it. But pretty stoked with how that came out. And then hold on here. Yeah, there it is. So that's in the wrong order, but whatever. You know, this is more advancing into the styling and everything that I was working on, understanding. I started talking more with designers. I started talking more with stylists, trying to understand and better understand styling and design choices and why they matter. But for the lighting people here, this is the lighting setup. So this is Ellen Chrome. I had just a smaller umbrella on top because I felt like it gave like a really nice shapely light to her. Ironically, my favorite lighting is lighting on location, but I hate doing it. So I just create it in post because it gives me less stress. But yeah, this is basically the lighting setup for it. Was one umbrella over top on a boom, and then one just as a fill, just to kind of fill in some of those shadows, just so they weren't completely dark. And then I had one more, you can see there's a little highlight on her elbow there. And one more light just bouncing off the side wall in the cove. So, and then a big old fan. Have I thought about adapting photos of the horse? No. I'm staying away from that one. My family escaped from Odessa, you know, at one of the previous wars, and I do not feel that it is my place to make conflict zone artwork yet. I don't know what to do with those things. That is a very sensitive topic with a lot of emotions wrapped around it. And I would never, ever, ever want to be perceived as trying to profit off of something that is extremely tragic. Sorry?
Oh, this is one of my favorite ones of yours.
Well, thank you. This is an experiment also. Again, like I said, I love to experiment. So I have a light stick in his hand, and I was just like, well, I wonder what happens if we, you know, replace the prop with something else. So basically, by having the light stick, and I had to photograph it, you know, quite low aperture because the light over top here, this is the strobe, but this one in his hand is continuous light, and it's not very bright. So basically I was just like, well, if I do it in camera, I can probably, then I don't have to hand paint in quite as much light, and I have kind of like a guideline. But yeah, this is my friend Ray, and he's awesome, and I love photographing him because he's always down for my crazy weird ideas. And I also feel like, you know, in digital art, one of the things that's severely underrepresented are, you know, older people, you know. So I actually have put like a big push on in my artwork to find older men and women who like have the gray hair and everything. I'm like, these are awesome characters. They look awesome. Like, let's make some cool stuff together. So yeah, I've started, you know, going out into the world and, you know, trying to find men and women who are down to be turned into like weird characters. So I have a shoot next week. A friend of mine, she has beautiful, super long hair, and it's all white. And I want to turn her into like an elder Galadriel, because you know, she's in her 50s, and she has just like the perfect skin texture, and she has like just like this great look. And so if you follow me on social media, hopefully I'll have something like that done like later next week, because I'm just really stoked about it.
A couple things I noticed on this. I liked how you kept the perspective of the buildings, letting key in, because that adds to that unstable, you know, for this scene. And then I love how you had his hand on the sword. You paid a lot of attention to detail to where his palm is out.
Yeah.
You know, because most people would have it the opposite, where you see the back of the hand, and it just looks weird. But putting it out like that, oh, you definitely paid a lot of attention to details on these. You love that overhead key light.
Well, I was hoping, so the actual location that I photographed here is in Belgium, and the roof is actually missing right where he's standing. So there is actual top light coming down from there. So let's see here. I can talk on NFTs after for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a bigger view of it, sorry. Like I said, this kind of got re-smashed together really early this morning. This is another behind the scenes. This image here on the left with the fire, I actually have a PSV that we can walk through if we have time after this. Again, large light over top and then some fill. But, the fun thing about like different ways and different design choices that you can make that completely change the feel of an image. One of them being, this hot, warm image with like a cool background balancing, and the other one being extremely cool toned all the way through all on its own. Really trying to push myself. So this is a bigger version of it here. So like I said, if we have time, I'll see if I can burn through that. And I'm almost done here. Again, working with people who are older. These guys here, again, they're in their 50s. They're a married couple, and they both are veterans. And they wanted images. Well, I photographed her husband first, and she was just like, oh my God, I want one of these of me. And so we went into the studio and draped some fur on her and made her look like an absolute badass. I had to convince her to let her grow her hair out because, of course, being military, her hair was always proper length. And I was like, hey, so any chance, we could like grow this out? I was working out of town and stuff a bunch, and her schedule is crazy. And so when it finally happened, her hair was nice and long, and I was like, yes. So I was super stoked about these. Again, this is another example of, evolving with digital art. So I started working more with different stunt groups, different stunt teams. I don't know if anybody here has ever watched the show Cavalia. It was a horse circus show that went around for a few years. And if you did, this is Erin and her horse Ike, and they worked in Cavalia. They performed in Cavalia for years and years down in Vegas and all around the world as a touring show. So just amazing talent watching these guys work together. And so when we were shooting, we were coming together with a concept. I was like, hey, how do you feel about doing like, a headless horsewoman? And there's actually there is an Irish folklore about headless horsewomen, and I always forget the name of it. But if you search Irish folklore headless horseman or headless horsewoman, I think it's called Doulahan or something like that. So I apologize to any of the Irish in this group if I'm horribly mispronouncing it. But yeah, again, just like another really fun image. And I edited this live for anybody who likes to watch this kind of stuff. If you search Wacom Renee Robyn Monster Week, you'll see this come up here, and you can watch the whole thing and how I made it for free. Again, just like dipping my toes into slightly more anime feel, kind of like noodling along, trying to find, new ways of like, whenever I get comfortable, I try to make myself uncomfortable. So changing the lighting setup of, stop doing this top overhead light and, make it from the side and make it gels, etc. I also started working with this Paralympian, Michelle Salt. She's a snowboarder. She actually rides motorcycles as well. A few months after my motorcycle accident, I had read in the news that there had been another woman who had been involved in an accident, and I had almost lost my leg, but she did. And it was actually very cool because I had kind of kept an eye on her career over the years. And she went on to compete in Russia, and she was in Sochi and somewhere else. I forget where else. And anyways, the opportunity to work with her was very, very cool and kind of emotional for me because I had watched her career and watched her explode on the professional or the, Olympian athlete tour, and, my own photo career. Basically, our careers exploded because we were involved in motorcycle accidents. And, I'd never met anybody else, particularly a woman who had gone through something similar before. So it was kind of an emotional experience to work with someone like that. That was kind of cool.
For the fire, did you use stock art with that, or did you create that on your own?
On my own.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm a fire breather, so I can photograph a lot of pretty cool stock if I need it.
Gotcha. So you took pictures of actual fire.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Hold on here. I think we're running out of time, so I'm gonna quickly just like, yeah. This is for Ben Von Wong's plastics campaign. If you want to see how that all came together, that was pretty fun as well. And this is the end. Yeah, so I was almost at the end there. This is the cover image. This guy here, he's a reptile breeder. And again, I'm also terrified of snakes. So in the process of chasing the things that I'm absolutely terrified of, I invited this guy to the studio, and he was like, I've never had my photo taken before. And I was like, what? How could you? Look at your face. It's amazing. How could you not have ever had your photo taken before? It's like this crazy, awesome textured beard and stuff. So he actually was amazing. He was like totally great to photograph. It was like, this reptile breeder who lived a few hours away, and he came up with all of his little snake buddies. And it was kind of interesting, like watching him work with these animals, because obviously I'm terrified of them. And it actually, again, like helped me kind of understand the creatures a little bit more, watching someone who's so comfortable with them, who knows them so well. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like
Now, Renee, do you ever
Go ahead.
see somebody in public and you're like, I gotta photograph them?
Not so much, because I think let me see here. Because me being interested in photographing someone has so much more to do with what their personality is than their looks. Their looks are very secondary. So I basically, if I find people online, I will lurk them for like 2 years. And, like what kind of stuff do they share? What are they talking about? Do they have a good attitude? Because I am way more interested in working with really interesting people versus the perfect look.
Yeah, I was eating dinner one night, late dinner, and I saw this guy, awesome tattoo, just phenomenal looking. And I just looked at him and said, dude, I gotta photograph you. He's like, what? I go, down the street, it's my studio, let's go. And so his wife and his son, we took him to the studio, and I photographed him, and he came out. It took me, and I told the wife, because I know she was a little like, why are we doing this? And it only took 1 minute and 30 seconds. When I shot him, when I came back, she had tears in her eyes when she saw the finished piece. And I thought it was incredible. Then later found out that she said he needed that. One of his relatives just passed away. She was, she was saying, what you just did for him is just absolutely amazing. Then come to find out later that we knew mutual people, but he posted on Facebook, what do you do when a big guy comes up to you and says, hey, I got a photograph, let's go. He goes, you hop in a car with an Italian and you wonder if you're ever going to make it back. He goes, in this case, I did make it back. Yeah, so I have no problem going up to strangers.
Yeah, I mean, it is the benefit of being a large man, though. I am a small person. I don't walk up to very many people and ask those kinds of questions. In my experience, I used to try it when I was younger, and I found that it was more of a pain in the ass than it was worth. So now I lurk and I play the long game. So I'm not saving anybody from grief, that's for sure.
Awesome. All right, Phil, you had something, Phil?
No, I just said carry a big gun. If she
Carry a big gun. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
pass
so-
on that one.
No, I did ask a question in the chat,
Yeah.
and she didn't notice it. Why do you put your watermark in the middle of the pictures as opposed to putting it in the left corner or right corner of the photograph?
Oh, just because when people steal my artwork, or they can't crop it out as easily. That's it. My
Oh, okay.
artwork gets stolen all the time, and I know that it's easy for companies to like edit out the watermark,
Right,
but I
yeah.
just don't care. I'm just like, because at the end of the day, like for my artwork that's getting viewed online, I don't care if people are seeing like the highest quality, best version of my work. I don't care. What I care are when people who order my prints, when they get their prints and they look at it on the wall and they're just like, holy crap, and it's like printed big and it looks awesome. Or when I license it for a show and it's 40 feet by 30 feet and people are
Right.
walking by it and it looks awesome. That's when I care. Whereas on the internet, I mean, nobody has the attention span, and 99% of people on the internet
Right.
don't know the difference between good and great. I mean, I'm going through it with a client right now where they're just like, we're doing this silhouette stuff and they want it basically selective color desaturation, and I just want to scream. And they're like, oh no, we like it all black and white, but like with that little bit of red. And I'm just like, no, this is the auto tune of photography. Don't make me do this. So I'll send it to them, but I'm telling them don't tag me. So that's why like when my work goes online and like even my website has watermarks all over it, I don't really care, because when people hire me and they get their high-res images or they get their prints or whatever, or they get their licensing, that's when I care.
What
Instagram doesn't
equipment and lens do you normally use when you're photographing?
Oh, I just have I have an old the Canon 5D Mark III and a Sigma 70-200 and a Canon 24-105 and a host of primes.
That's
Renee,
awesome. Wow.
All right, Jim,
Renee,
one second, let me let Jim next. Raise your hand. Yeah, if you want to answer a question, raise your hand. Jim?
Oh,
Yeah, thank you. By the way, there's so many things here to love about these photos. I mean, they're impactful. The colors are wonderful. They're moody. The lighting is fantastic. But the part that really catches my eye is they have a nice look overall. And my question would be, do you use a LUT or do you just desaturate colors? What is it that you do with the colors that gives them just a beautiful overall look?
Thank you. I definitely just push sliders until it sucks less. Remember like the cat with the fur getting rubbed the wrong way? That is basically, I just go into whether I'm in Photoshop or popping into ACR back and forth. There's a whole lot of like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you know, so for as long as I'll spend on masking, I'll spend just as long, if not longer, trying to figure out the colors sometimes. And sometimes it's uphill.
Are you using pretty much just the sliders for saturation, desaturation, and maybe tint, that kind of thing? Is that where you're spending your time?
I'm using all of them. Every single color tool that's available to me, I'm sliding through it. The one thing that I don't use too much are color channels. The color balance, definitely. Curves, definitely. Hue, saturation, luminance sliders for sure. Like all the things.
Do you use anything like color gradients ever?
Sometimes I'm less comfortable with them. I don't actually understand them that well, which all of my friends who do big compositing art, they all swear by it. And I don't know if I'm just not wired to learn it properly, but it's been a little bit of an uphill. I've never really quite got it, and I don't understand why, because from what I understand, it's not that complicated, but I'm missing like a root. I'm missing like a little tiny piece of something for it to make sense.
The video world loves the color grading.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's where, of course, the LUTs came in. Harvey, was that your question also,
Yes.
or do you have something?
yes, I had a question. You mentioned how you get inspired to do these creative photos. And this is a serious question. Where did you get the inspiration or the idea to do the bride in blood on the whatever that was?
Up on the bridge.
on the
Yeah.
bridge.
So
Where did that idea come from?
I had a friend of mine in from Montreal, and we were going through the costuming that was in my studio, and that was the one dress that fit her. And she's an actress, and she put this hood on and everything, and she just did this one pose. And I was like, oh, damn, that's a good one. I was like, what can we do with that? And then I was like, oh, Little Red Riding Hood had a bad day. And so that's literally how that happened. It literally just like fell out of my head like an overexcited golden retriever puppy.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Creativity. That's real creativity.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Great. I know you wanted to touch base quickly on NFTs, but that could be a whole session on its own.
That's a whole session on its own for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
It doesn't sound Canadian.
But overall, I mean, absolutely amazing work, Renee. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for hanging out and checking it out. Like I said, I was trying to like, oh my God, get through it quickly.
Now, where can people find more about you? And Russ put this in the chat.
Yeah. So, I mean, the easiest is my website. And I just put that in there. And let's see here. TikTok and Twitter. So TikTok and Twitter is at Renee Robyn Photo.
You're on
And
TikTok?
I am actually. I had a couple of videos go viral on there, which is very strange. But yeah, and then on Instagram and Facebook is at Renee Robyn Photography, and then YouTube I think is, if you search Renee Robyn, I should show up. I think it's
awesome.
I think it's at Renee.
And we'll touch base about the LA studio, that photographer. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah, Brett's awesome. Yeah, he's totally amazing, and he does great work.
And
So
Benjamin Van Wong I'm not mistaken, he did a lot of stuff with Smug Mug.
Yeah, well, Ben and I both work with Smug Mug. We have for a long time. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I was one of the originals with Smug Mug, helping them in the very, very beginning. And his
Oh, that's
work
awesome.
he did, yeah, his work that he did with them, he took each of them
The portraits.
into the gym, right? And whatever they were, if they were cyclists and all that, and or a weightlifter, he did some incredible stuff with them. And they made them into like these huge, huge posters and put them inside their fitness gym. That was amazing. Then that's where I learned about the rain. He created a real simple rain machine out of.
Oh yeah, with the
PVC
tube.
pipe.
Yeah.
Yep. A great guy.
Yeah,
And out in Denmark, well, after the Netherlands, is Frank Dorhoff. He's another
Yeah,
one.
Frank's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
Frank's
So
awesome.
Frank's gonna be on next month.
Oh, good. Right on.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Frank-
thanks,
Frank's
Renee. I've really enjoyed this evening. I live near London in England, and if you're ever over here, I know a fabulous little Italian restaurant in Mayfair.
Yeah.
Well, I love
Right.
the UK. It's been a while since I've been there, so I'm missing
Phil,
going overseas.
Phil, please ask a good question.
Well, I only had one wondering, I put it in the chat. Renee, have you ever investigated NFTs? And are you, would it something you would think about selling your artwork? as an
I mean,
NFT?
basically, at the end of the day, I have conflicting opinions on them, but at the end of the day, I'm a full-time artist, and if somebody wants to give me money for something that I'm working on, then I will possibly sell it, but I haven't yet. I haven't pulled that trigger yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm basically like riding the fence, but at the same time, if somebody wanted to buy, like I have to make a living out of art. And if the market is shifting towards digital, fine. And if it isn't, fine, whatever, like I can adapt. So
A
but
true
it would be nice if
entrepreneur.
there was a greener option.
A true entrepreneur. Yes,
Well,
Robin. Thank you
starvation
very
is a hell
much.
of a motivator.
Thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Well, thanks for watching it, guys. I appreciate it. Hopefully it was interesting.
Awesome. I gotta thank Darlene for introducing us. So I'm forgetting, we're in Visual Storytelling Conference. Where was
Yes.
it? Yep.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks
No.
again, and I'll touch base with you after the show. All right.
For sure.
Thanks.
Yeah,
And everyone
absolutely.
else.
Well, thank you
You
so
bet.
much for checking it all out, guys. It's super nice to meet and see all your faces. There's 3 pages with the people here. What the hell? How are there so many of you? What have you guys
Thanks,
done? There's
Renee.
a whole pod of you guys. A bunch of overexcited artistic dolphins.
We are.
All right. Well, thanks again, Renee, and we'll see you at the next coffee break.